we're going to get started, and once more legislators hop in, we'll have them introduce themselves. So Senator Cohen, if you want to start, you are on mute, so *6 to unmute. Just go over what committee you're chair of and your top legislative priority for this session.
Sure. I haven't started driving yet, so I will start my video as well, because I know it's usually easier when you can see folks talking. So hi everyone, I'm Senator Christine Cohen. I represent the 12th district in Connecticut, which includes Branford, Guilford, Madison, North Branford, Durham, and Killingworth. I'm also Senate Chair of the Environment Committee, as well as Vice Chair of the Commerce Committee. And I'm also seated on Finance, Children, and Aging this year. So really excited about the breadth of committee work that I'll be focused on this session. Certainly, much of my focus is on the environment as Senate Chair, and always look forward to this meeting each and every year to hear from all of the stakeholders on what really is important to them. As many of you know, there's a heavy focus on waste mitigation. There has been for the past couple of years, but it's more important than ever as municipalities and taxpayers really struggle with the high costs of hauling trash and what we're faced with in the plant with the potential shutdown of the Mira plant, and what that means for our other waste facilities in the state, and what that means for the future of trash. And the last thing we want to be doing from an environmental standpoint is exporting trash to landfills, when we ensured that we weren't using landfills here anymore in Connecticut. So with the formation of the CCSMM group on Sustainable Materials Management, headed by many CEOs through, town CEOs throughout the state of Connecticut, we'll be, listening to those recommendations, as well as some of the recommendations out of the Governor's Council on Climate Change, the GC3, who both groups just finalized their reports. So we're working closely with DEEP and DOAG on some of the proposals that are coming out of those groups. Also, many of you know, I see many familiar names and faces on this call. Many of you know that we are working feverishly on the release-based remediation regs, and I have been listening, to those sessions, and excited by the potential there of the input from so many of the stakeholders. So that's what's going on from an environmental perspective. Again, I just always value hearing what you all have to say. You're really the boots on the ground, and can really help us lead legislation in the right direction. So grateful to be here this morning and happy to answer any questions that I can.
Great, thank you so much. So we're also joined by Senator Needleman. So if you just want to introduce yourself briefly and a top priority for your committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Norm Needleman. I'm the senator representing the 33rd district, also a CBIA member and business owner in the state. Probably concerned about all the same things everyone else is concerned about. I'm chair of the Energy and Technology Committee, co-chair, and we are going to be focusing on many of the same things that Senator Cohen was talking about, although with a slightly different focus. We are charged with overseeing the utilities, electric rate structure, et cetera. And so we passed a very big bill in September. We have more to do. There's a tremendous push at the state level to move us to more renewables, obviously, and get to a carbon-free grid as soon as we can. But we're looking, my co-chair and I have a focus on doing that, but without having a tremendous impact on the rates. So it's a multi-leg stool. We certainly want more wind and solar. We also want to make sure that the ratepayers, business and consumer in the state of Connecticut don't have to get burdened by higher rates than we already have. So there's a lot. I think we have a very, very big agenda this year, and looking forward to hearing from you. Maybe I'm looking forward about this much. No, really. Seriously, I'm available and always am. So whatever you guys need. Thanks.
Great. So for Senator Cohen, you mentioned the CCSMM working group and coalition. Is there any recommendation out of that that you're most excited about or that you think has the most potential?
You know, just as Senator Needleman said, there's going to be a lot of crossovers between the two committees, and one of those crossovers is going to be food waste separation and organics, you know, anaerobic digestion. So we're going to be taking a close look at that. You know, food accounts for a tremendous amount of weight in the waste stream. Which is what, you know, we're really focused on when you're talking about hauling. There's some real environmental benefits to organic separation, both from, you know, on-farm businesses and digesters, as well as, you know, the plant we all know and love, Quantum Biopower in Southington. How do we bring more of these digesters up online? We know that there are several more that have already been permitted, but you're talking about investment on the part of those folks without, you know, quite frankly, a commitment from the state of Connecticut. And so we're going to be looking more and more at organic separation is the bottom line, and what that, you know, what that looks like and how that takes shape remains to be seen. We need to go through the public hearing process, and we need, you know, the Energy and Technology Committee will be talking about rates a lot with respect to anaerobic digesters. You know, so, you know, I think you'll see a lot of this unfold, and again, we'll be relying on information from stakeholders and the folks that really know about this as we move forward.
Great. And we're also joined by Senator Fermika. So Senator, if you want to give a quick intro and then also list your top priority. And I just see Representative Ferrara also hopped on. So once Senator Fermika is done, if you'd like to give a quick little bio and what your top priorities are going to be this session.
Okay. Thank you. Am I unmuted, Ashley? Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you once again for the opportunity to say hello at the beginning of the session, which is going to be a very interesting session in terms of the mechanics. I think, you know, you're asking about what we should be doing to help the business climate and the state move forward. You know, one of the things I think starts with the legislative process. We're going to have to find a way to communicate with you on a regular basis, and find ways for you to communicate with us on a regular basis that might be a little easier than, you know, than this whole Zoom thing. And just as an example, you know, I was getting on, I had everything all set up. I see my picture on it. I went to move my laptop and I hit the off button, and I had to start all over again, you know. So, you know, I think we're going to start to see a lot of the information, a lot of the procedures on a trial and error basis as we move through the session. You know, we've done some rules, we had some opportunities to do things, but I think it's going to have to be a trial and error, and I think we're all going to have a little patience. But one of the big things is access and availability for the people here in the People's House. I represent the 20th district, which is a portion of Old Saybrook, Old Lyme, East Lyme, Waterford, New London, a portion of Montville, Basra, and Salem. I have been on the Energy Committee since I started in 2000. 2015. And it's a fascinating committee, you know, with a lot of opportunities. And if we think about what we were at in 2015 and where we are now, you know, energy has changed, you know, almost entirely since then. We're shifting toward a renewable grid. We have to look closely at the realities, the mechanics, the practicality, and the affordability of all that to make sure that Connecticut's residents and business community are able to be competitive and afford the energy that we're provided. The committee took a long look at Eversource over the summer, and I think that look will continue. I think we have to look at how Pura operates. You know, we empowered them a little bit more in the special session, and I think the conversation is going to be, should they be separated from DEEP instead of being under the same agency? I think that's a conversation we should have. I heard Senator Cohen talk about anaerobic digesters, and I believe you know, the Energy Committee has an interest in that as well. So I look forward to working with the Environment Committee on that. I think we have to look at the wholesale market and see if there are any changes, modifications, upgrades that we have to do. Certainly now that we've secured nuclear for the next 10 years as a baseload, that kind of gives us a timeline in order to make sure that we can replace that baseload. And, you know, I'm not sure the renewable is entirely the way to do that. The pier in New London has, you know, been targeted for the biggest expansion of renewable energy, that offshore wind production. But, you know, there's been a lot of problems with that in terms of how that the Connecticut Port Authority got underway, and it seems to have kind of distorted the issue at hand, which is, you know, how do we get out there and generate wind turbine offshore that in a way that's going to rival the success in Europe and that's going to be able to replace, you know, 2,000 to 4,000 megawatts over a period of the next 20 years, where we're going to need. We're going to need to look regionally across not only the state. We have to make sure Bridgeport and New London are good offshore hubs, and we have to look around the region and see what communications and conversations we can have with, you know, other states, New York, Massachusetts, you know, where they might be utilizing Connecticut assets to assemble the components and maybe move that out there. So what opportunities do we have for Connecticut businesses? What opportunities do we have for assembly plants, manufacturing plants, component parts assembly that can be located here in Connecticut instead of being shipped from Europe to create jobs and economic opportunities? So I think overall that's the broad conversation. And then I will just, I noticed I forgot to mention battery backup, which is, you know, we have to promote the technology advancement of that, because right now it's not affordable and practical on a long, on a big basis. But, you know, it's going to need to be if we're going to ever take renewables and make them baseload. So thank you very much for the opportunity to say good morning, and I wish you all a wonderful day. And I guess, what are we doing? Are we hanging around and?
Yep, questions and answers and just having a dialogue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ashley, this is Norman again. I'm sorry, I'm still in my home. I have to get up to the Capitol, so I'm gonna bug out. But if anybody has any questions for me specifically, you can just forward them on to me. I agree with what Paul said. I agree with what Christine said. We are, some things are going to cost more money and be more inconvenient. That much I can tell you. The garbage thing is something that I've been involved with for a long time, as a first selectman, as a business owner, and as a senator now. And I know that the people working on it are doing the best job they can, but it's a difficult problem. So unless somebody has something that's an emergency or very specific, I don't want to cut Charlie off, but we are going into session at 10 o'clock and I'm down in Essex, so I got to get up there. I see Senator Fermika must be up there already. So
I am. I was early today, Senator.
there you go. Well,
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, we'll forward any questions over to you. I mean, if you have any questions, please let us know. We are a resource for you.
I know that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, sending it over to Representative Ferraro. I think you're on mute still.
So I guess I'm unmuted now.
Good to go.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for hosting this event. Just to echo the difficulties of these type of meetings, I saw it in my calendar that this meeting was going to take place at 8:30 in the morning, so I made my usual preparation to be able to be here for it. But then when I logged into my calendar, there was no link to the meeting. And this is a problem that I've had on a number of meetings this past week where I've had to call the organizer and get the link, which I did this morning in order to get online. So I think that's one of the difficulties that Senator Fermika alluded to in this medium, trying to hold meetings this way. It's really important if we're going to be timely to, have all the information at our disposal. Senator Fermika did a great overview of what the goals are of the Energy Technology Committee. This will be my second term on the committee as ranking member. And I will say this much, that this committee has worked under very difficult, pressured circumstances in the time that I've been on it. And they've worked bipartisanly to make sure that we bring forward the best legislation we can to move Connecticut forward with regards to its energy needs. The offshore wind project that Senator Fermika referred to, the 2,000 megawatts to replace the entire output and baseload of the nuke plant, is essential because one of the things that gets lost in this whole thing is that Millstone does provide 50% of all the energy needs of Connecticut residents. So waiting to the last minute would have been a huge mistake. Some of the other industries within the renewable energy field, solar energy, aerobic digestion, fuel cells, all the above approach is going to be essential if we're going to reach the goals that we've set for ourselves. One of the other things that we need to look into that I think needs to be mentioned as well is efficiency. We need to look into property and building efficiency, efficiency of refrigerators and washing machines and all that, which most of the new equipment is being made with the higher standards. But the problem is a lot of the businesses that are struggling need to replace old equipment and really can't afford to go into the new equipment. And so there needs to be an adjustment period to allow our businesses to get back on their feet. We're going to come out of COVID, hopefully, in the summer and fall of this year. And the casualties that are going to be left behind are going to be many small businesses. And many states are dealing with the fallout already. Connecticut has been fortunate to some degree, and we haven't suffered as badly as some of those states. But I do think that a lot of our small businesses are going to be in need of assistance, and some of the programs that we've implemented, the PPE program and the loan program to small businesses has helped. But I'm really, really concerned about the ability of some of our small businesses to sustain their viability with some of the legislation that we passed recently, such as maybe increasing the minimum wage each year by $1. If maybe some delays in that could be, could be implemented to give the businesses time to get back on their feet. Some of the maybe the deduction, payroll deduction for paid family leave could be delayed to allow the workers to get back on their feet a little bit, although I know it's a very small amount now. I mean, in a time like this, I think every little bit helps. So I am concerned about recovery. This year, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. It wasn't my favorite committee in my first term, being that I was not really experienced in that level. And I kind of found my way off the committee in my second term, but leadership saw fit that I should be on the committee again. So I am looking forward with the experience I've learned and what I've learned to be able to contribute in a more positive manner on that committee. I think that committee is going to be very, very instrumental and very important in helping getting Connecticut back up and running again. I think the governor overall has done a fairly good job at making sure that his committees in getting Connecticut up and running, vaccination and all that are going, are moving. I am concerned regarding the legislative process and how the legislature itself has been put on the sidelines. And I do believe that at some point the legislature needs to be plugged in and work as a partner with the governor's office and moving the state forward. One of the biggest issues in energy and technology, I think, will be the storage that the senator spoke about. We intend on visiting that again this session on the Energy Technology Committee and seeing what we can do to increase battery storage, because I think that's going to help move our green energy goals forward with regards to renewable energy grid. He alluded to looking at ISO New England. Personally, I think that it's imperative that we continue a relationship with ISO New England, and that we maybe visit that relationship and make sure we're doing it as efficiently as possible. Other than that, I should probably say I represent West Haven, Orange, and Milford in the 117th, and I welcome conversation and listening to what others have to say, and appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today.
Great, thanks so much. So there's one issue there's many issues, but one in particular that I feel covers environment and energy and technology really well. It's the Transportation Climate Initiative Program that the governor signed the MOU for about a month ago or a couple weeks ago. What are your initial thoughts on that, and where do you think you see some issues, and where do you think you see some real opportunity? And Senator Fermika, if you want to start it out.
Thanks very much, Ash. Listen, there's always good and bad in these things, and I think the idea of the initiative is good. I think the timing of it is a little bit suspect, and perhaps we may need to revisit it. I'm concerned that our neighboring states are not all signed on. And I'm concerned about the increase in the cost of gasoline for the residents here in the state of Connecticut. If anywhere you hear anything from 5 cents to 17 cents a gallon going up, while we're pushing forward on to try to manage the grid so that it can handle electric vehicles, which will drive down the usage of gas a little bit more than it is. And none of that money will seem to get to the Special Transportation Fund, which is something that is a serious problem for the budget here in the state of Connecticut. And we're going to need to look to try to find some way to correct that. We're facing a large budget deficit here for the state. This will be my first year in 6 that I am not on appropriations. It's a great committee. It's a lot of work, and it will have to revisit a lot of these issues. Excuse me. The good news, I believe, is the underlying economy is much stronger today than it was in the last Great Recession of 2008, 9, 10, 11. So I think once we get moving out of this and we unleash the power of this economy, I think recovery is going to be quicker, and I think that'll help the businesses, the residences, and certainly the state with revenue. But the climate initiative, as I said, I think the timing may be a little bit early for something like that. We need to focus on economic recovery, emotional recovery, and health recovery out of this pandemic, and make sure that we have the proper balance.
And Senator Cohen?
Thanks, Ashley. It's a great program as far as I'm concerned. There are a lot of states that have joined the consortium to discuss moving forward with TCI. And several have signed on at this point. The others have agreed to remain in the consortium and can join at any time. The states that have joined, make up a incredibly large percentage of emissions here in New England, upwards of 75%. So it's not a small impact just with the states who have joined. It's actually quite significant. And just by where we're situated in Connecticut, I know Commissioner Dykes likes to use the term we're the tailpipe of all the emissions for the country, but we truly are the way emissions flow and the wind patterns. So it's really something that we absolutely need to address. This is, we're in the midst of a climate crisis. By all scientific accounts. And if we want to see this Earth here for future generations, we need to address this sooner rather than later. We really just can't afford to wait at this point. There are cost containment systems in place to ensure that people aren't paying exorbitant amounts at the pump with this initiative. And I think we need to do a better job in Connecticut with electric vehicle incentives and ensuring our low and middle income families can afford electric vehicles as we move in this direction. Right now, we don't do a very good job of that at all. So, we need to get better about some of these other pieces in concert with TCI in order to make this work and to ensure it's an effective program.
Great, thanks. And Representative Farrar?
Okay, with regards to TCI, I will admit up front, I am not well versed in the details of the program. I do concur with Senator Fermika in that, it is in concept a good idea, but timing is very, very important. I think we have priorities that I feel, no disrespect to Senator Cohen. She indicated the urgency of this program. I personally think that there are other priorities that might take precedent at this time. And recovery from this pandemic, I think, is number one. I do think that we're addressing climate changes on many, many levels already. I'm not sure that an increase to the gas tax at this time is going to be beneficial to our economy. I think that looking at emissions and how to cut emissions is important. But I think that there's a pecking order with regards to that, and I wouldn't put it number one right now. As I said, the devil's in the details, so I don't really know enough about the program. I will certainly keep an open mind when it's brought forward. I do think eventually we're going to get at the elements within the program, and I think it's well intentioned. I just, question whether the timing of it right now is the best direction to go. That's really all I can say about it, because it's really all I know about it at the moment.
Ashley, can I just add a couple of points on TCI as well?
Go for it.
I just want to also mention, this is a cap and trade program, much like we have going for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which we know works really well. It's not actually a tax, so we're selling allowances, to wholesalers. And they do have the ability to increase pricing, but as I said, there's a cost containment system that's built into the model. So we're probably looking at an increase of about 5 cents. The models give us a range, but we're probably looking at a 5-cent increase. And this would be something that would be a little bit further out, probably looking at 2023 as an actual start date to this program. So it's not something that's happening in the midst of the pandemic, because I can certainly understand the concerns, as we're navigating our way through this really tough economy with a global pandemic on our hands. So I just wanted to make a couple clarifying statements about the program, and again say that I think we need to be doing a much better job of incentivizing other programs like electric vehicles to make them more affordable for people as we move forward with something like this.
Great, thanks for those comments. We did get a question from our member, Mark Bodman, who, Senator Cohen, if you wouldn't mind commenting on the ways in which Connecticut can improve the infrastructure for managing organics, the likely time frame for any new projects, and perhaps why the emphasis on anaerobic digestion as opposed to static aerated pile composting, which is less expensive. If you wouldn't mind touching on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mark. And I know you and I have had some conversations around this, and quite frankly, the conversation is still unfolding as we learn more about what might work best for our state and what might work really well. In some of our 169 townships may not work well in others, and so we need to balance that out. We may, promote the static composting in some areas, and in fact, in a lot of places where there is organic separation, they're not all, not every household is hauling waste, and municipalities can have different options. I know through CCSMM, DEEP had done a survey of its members just to see, sort of gauge where folks are at on whether or not they'd want to see a facility at their transfer station. And when I say facility, I don't mean a full anaerobic digester, but perhaps a pulping station or a collection site of some sort. And in some cases that may be compost piles as opposed to, hauling that off to a bio plant. So I think the conversation is still ongoing. Like I said, we'll be working really closely with the Energy and Technology Committee, Senator Fermika and Senator Needleman, and of course, the House leadership of that committee to determine, what each committee is going to be hearing at a public hearing. And then, we'll really be relying on folks like yourself, Bristol Resource Recovery, and other people in the industry to give us some direction and some insight on what might work and what just simply won't work.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. So for the next question, we've got the state, their new energy plan is they're committed to cheaper, cleaner, more reliable energy. How do you think that should be prioritized? Where do you think the emphasis should be on? And we'll start with Representative Ferrara.
Could you repeat that, please?
Of course. So with the state focusing on cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable energy, and that being kind of the slogan for moving forward, where do you think the priority should be on cheaper part, cleaner part, the more reliable energy portion? So just your thoughts on that.
Well, obviously, it's got to be a balance. We have to weigh the technologies that we incorporate with the cost, the eventual cost to the consumer. So, I said earlier, all the above approach is probably the best one, but keeping in mind that there's always a balance between delivery and cost. And, we're going to need to continue, if we're going to continue offering solar energy, we're going to need to continue to subsidize the industry. The industry cannot exist on its own. We're going to need to, if we're going to move towards more electric cars in the state, we're going to have to look at charging stations and be creative in how we can get them positioned throughout the state. So that those that do have electric cars can plug in when needed. Fuel cells are, important aspect of this. There's going to be some talk this session on making sure that fuel cells have a representation. There's, as you know, a recent issue with one of the fuel cell or a few of the fuel cell companies that had been granted a contract and then the contract had been pulled back. Some folks would like to see the fuel cells included in the class 1 energy sources. I think anaerobic digestion, maybe smaller setups where farms can use them efficiently and be able to maybe derive cake from the anaerobic digestion and then be able to use the cake to generate energy. I think there's things that we have to look into with regards to becoming more efficient with those energy sources. And all in all, as we move towards a carbon-free energy grid and try to reach our goals that we've set, we're going to have to try to find ways to keep the costs down. And if we can't do that, it's going to create an obstacle for a lot of these technologies that we would like to see incorporated.
Great. Senator Fermika?
Thank you, Ash. The question was related to cheaper, more reliable. It's going to be very difficult, I think, as we transform to the next level of the next generation of energy generation, to to say the word cheaper. I think we have to contain the cost as we make an investment in our energy opportunities. And we know what the cost to invest in the offshore wind is going to be, the cost to invest in grid scale solar is going to be, and then those intermittent power sources will not be as effective in baseload without an investment in battery storage. We have a grid that is in desperate need of modernization and upgrade. There's going to be investments necessary in that. So, how do we begin? We have to first come together and have a discussion on timeline here in Hartford as to how we're going to develop that. I think we have to promote home technology that promotes conservation. And I think we have to have an education program that talks, to people in all walks of life and in all manners of use of power, whether they're large businesses, small businesses, or home residents, on how to conserve and what the best way to conserve is. And then I think finally we have to, continue the process of analyzing utility operations and where that is. If more and more people are putting solar on their roof, that's less generation that is coming in from the grid. And that's why I think we've seen the imbalance in the transmission costs and the utility bills versus the generation costs. And the generation costs are coming down a little bit. So, so it's not just one or two things. I think it's the whole picture of what we need to look like, and we need to make incremental steps. But I think if we're talking cheaper power, we need to first look at conservation and technology in the home front.
Great, thank you. And Senator Cohen.
I don't know that I can say it any better than Senator Fermika, sort of laid out for us, and Representative Ferrero. They're most adept at the energy field. Speaking to that, I think, we do have a conundrum in balancing out, delivery charges, and the generation charges, and figuring out how to balance our move towards renewables. Certainly as an environmentalist, I want to see us move to 100% renewable as quickly as possible. But I'm also a realist, and I know, what that will do to our grid and what that will do to our consumer pricing. I'm also a small business owner, and I pay a tremendous amount in electricity. All of these things need to come in balance with one another. And but we do need to be doing all we can as we move towards a renewable generation of wind and solar, and a combination of these new technologies. So. But I defer to the Energy and Technology Committee on all things energy and technology. It's a smart thing to do.
Indeed. So we did get a question from Matt Hackman, kind of going off of what Representative Ferraro mentioned in his comments. Has there given any thought to tax incentives for businesses who provide charging stations or who want to convert their fleets over to electric vehicles? And we'll start with Senator Fermika.
Thank you, Ash. As Senator Ferraro mentioned, we will have to move to charging station locations as a strategy throughout our state. I'm not sure that tax incentives are really the way to go for that. I'm not sure if having a charging station in your business is a customer service is a customer service program that businesses would benefit by if they provided that. Now you have a lot of large corporations with a lot of parking spots that, you know, the investment may be significant. So there perhaps could be some program that we can initiate either through the utilities or through, you know, through the state to offset some of the initial conversion. You know, but I'm trying to look at it, you know, in my business, and I, you know, I have 56 parking spaces in mine, and, you know, I think it would be a good customer service program to have one or two. What's the ratio? I don't know. We're going to have to talk about that. But I think that's a conversation. And if any, you know, business that's listening today that certainly is larger, more, has a more significant footprint than my little place is, you know, I'd love to hear some conversation about that. You know, send us a, you know, or speak to us now, or send us an opportunity that you think might make sense for your business, and then, you know, maybe we can work that in to a program that makes sense in a regulation or a statute or a tax deduction or some type of incentive to move there. You know, I'm reminded we have to make sure we have, you know, energy to generate electricity here in the state, and we have to work on generation too. So, but thank you.
Great. Senator Cohen?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. You know, it's a really good question, and I've been talking a lot about incentivizing electric vehicle purchase and conversion of the same. It goes along those lines. Last year, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection led Connecticut in joining, I think it's, you know, between 12 and 15 states. I want to say 14 states. We agreed to, we signed a memorandum of understanding that we would have move towards zero emissions in medium and heavyweight vehicles by 2050, with a 30% reduction by 2030. And in order to do that, and that's for new vehicle sales, obviously, that's not, we're not talking about conversion, but in order to do that, you really need to start making these more affordable for businesses and incentivizing their use. You know, I have a local landscaping company in my district who just converted all of their vehicles and all of their power equipment. They've got solar panels on their work vans powering their equipment. It's really creative, and you know, there's a market for it as well, as people are looking for more environmentally friendly solutions, you know, to things such as lawn care. So, but are we doing anything to incentivize those businesses to work in that direction? You know, the answer right now is no, but I think we absolutely need to, especially in light of, you know, like this MOU that was signed with these other states. So, you know, I'm interested in hearing more about that and the types of things that would make it easier for commercial, you know, commercial fleets to move towards electrification.
Great, thank you. And Representative Ferrara.
Thank you, Ashley. You know, when you look at our state and the ability for a gas-powered vehicle to be able to pull into a gas station and gas up and hit the road, it's the ability to do that is ubiquitous across the state. And when you look at converting all the vehicles in the state of Connecticut to electric, and you look at the what would be needed with regards to an infrastructure for those vehicles to be able to do the same thing that a gas-powered vehicle can do anywhere ubiquitously across the state, you begin to realize how daunting a task we really have in front of us. Some of the things that we might want to look into are maybe private partnerships. Something like, Tesla, I think, was willing to contract to put up a number of these charging stations. Maybe there's other companies that would be willing to do that. The Green Bank and some of these other banks that leverage dollars, at a fairly high rate, might be able to help out in financing the original financing of the infrastructure. But one thing that is apparent and I think is beneficial for our state is that the electrification of our state is happening incrementally and over time. Gives us time to catch up, so to speak, with it. And as we move towards electrification, I think that we're going to have to, I don't think the state's going to be able to subsidize the rollout of the kind of electrical charging stations that we're going to need. It's going to be massive, but I do think in combination with maybe some incentive programs and some private partnerships and leveraging dollars through our Green Bank, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. I think that we need to sit down with all the stakeholders, figure out how to move the state forward, and how to achieve these goals. It's obvious that we're moving in that direction. A timeline would be really, really important to know how long it's going to take us to get there, and so and what changes we need to make. So it's a conversation I look forward to on many levels.
Great. All right, so we did also get another question from Lee Hoffman. Senator Fermika, you mentioned battery storage, which will be necessary for dealing with the intermittency of renewables. Will the legislature be looking at the demand charges levied by the utilities that put battery systems at a competitive disadvantage? And we'll start with you, Senator Fermika.
Thanks very much, Ash. Good question. I think that should be part of what we look at in terms of what the great former chair of this committee, Lonnie Reed, used to call Utility 2.0, right? Which is the next way that we're going to operate. And I think we ought to look at the different levels of time for the demand charges, and we have to make sure that the technology for battery storage is incentivized and move forward. So I think that's all part of the picture, and we have to look at that as kind of one situation, not two there, where if we're going to incentivize these battery storage, how do we best fit it into the usage picture? I don't hear you, Ash, if you said something.
All right. Representative Ferraro, do you have any additional comments on that?
Not too much in that it was an excellent question. Obviously, we need to increase battery storage exponentially in our state in order to bring the price of energy down, especially during peak times. But like the senator said, it's something that we have to look into. The big ECIs are the Eversource, UI getting into the storage business could have an impact on the battery storage industry, and could make it difficult for some other companies to compete. And that's what we have to try to avoid, and try to make sure that we have a level playing field so that we can get the kind of storage that we need in order to in order to support the usage that's going to come out of all this. So that's all I could really add to it.
Thank you. And I know it's more of an energy question than an environment question, but Senator Cohen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just would say here, Lee Hoffman, because I would love to see us look into this a little bit more, especially from a personal standpoint. You know, I just recently went electric on my vehicle and, you know, looking into battery storage right now for my home and, you know, hearing from others, you know, as to whether or not this is a cost-effective solution for people going forward. I think, you know, it's absolutely something we need to explore. So I'd love to see a public hearing on something like this.
Great. So next question that we got in, where and how can the state and municipalities support rather than direct private enterprise in identifying and exploring potential profit and waste residuals management? So we'll start with you, Senator Cohen.
Well, I think, I mean, I'd almost like you to repeat the question, but I think I've got it. You know, I think a lot of this revolves around, well, rates certainly, and as we talk about waste efforts across the state and what we're generating at some of our facilities, but also, you know, as we move to anaerobic digestion, looking at the business opportunities there across the state, as well as, you know, how that helps and incentivizes municipalities and, you know, incentivizing new hauling companies coming online, like food waste haulers. You know, we have really one hauler with respect to food waste. We have one bio plant for food. We have, you know, in addition to now a farm digester coming up online. But we have to be thinking more and more about this and ways to incentivize and create new business agreements around, you know, how we're moving Connecticut forward and working in concert with the business community.
And same question, Representative Ferrara. I know it's more of an environment question than a energy question, but if you have anything else to add.
Could you just repeat the question again, please?
Yeah. So the question is, where and how can the state and municipalities support rather than direct private enterprise in identifying and exploiting potential profit and waste residuals management? Again, I know it's more of an environment committee question than an energy question, but if you have any comments you'd like to make.
Well, many of our municipalities are, as you know, are stressed as it is. Supporting private industry for waste. I think Senator Cohen talked a lot about farm digesters and things like that. But in many urban areas where I come from in West Haven, there's very little farmland and very little of that going on. Of course, restaurants need to get rid of their waste, and there's a significant amount of waste generated through restaurants. Maybe the municipalities could somehow, I don't know, offer a tax incentive to companies that would have digesters in their restaurants. One of the things that I'm pretty big on is fuel cells take up a lot of load, and cities that have fuel cells that take care of municipal buildings and things like that would be able to save money on that end, and then maybe they can reinvest the money in supporting some of the companies that would remove solid waste and from their municipality. That's really, I can't really think of anything else, to be honest with you.
That's okay.
Okay.
Over to another question. How are we doing compared to other states in terms of offshore wind farming? Are we being successful? Where are we in relation to other states? And Senator Fermika, I'll let you start this one.
All right. Thank you very much. Just as a quick add to the previous question, I think one of the things that we could do to benefit municipalities and businesses is to drastically improve the permitting process coming out of DEEP and other government agencies. I think that would help. We have to look at the trash to energy problem that we're having. That's going to be a significant cost moving forward, especially as we consolidate it into a single stream pickup, which saved the towns a lot of money in labor. And now we're talking about separating that. We have to find ways, to manage that cost. So. Also, the pandemic has challenged the food chain, so we have to support our farms. So, that being said, wind, offshore wind in Europe, provides a significant portion of the energy generated across Europe, and those large corporations have moved over here to the East Coast, which is an emerging industry now. So we have to make sure that we promote that, I believe, because I think it's the biggest opportunity for grid scale power. And I just want to make sure, Ash, that I'm answering the right question. We're talking about promoting wind energy here in this country, right? You said something about states, but I think we're seeing it first on in the Northeast. I think the Block Island wind farm was the canary in the coal mine. Deepwater Wind went through the process of permitting and installing those few turbines, and then they were bought up by Ørsted, and then Ørsted joined forces with Eversource, which I'm sure have their eye on the transmission possibilities with this. With these hundreds of wind turbines offshore, we're going to need a lot of transmission. So, there are a lot of considerations that we have to work on. I think there's opportunity, but we have to make sure that we protect our maritime community. We have to make sure that where that power is transmitted and where it lands, that the grid is capable of transmitting all of that new energy, and we have to make sure that Connecticut remains competitive in terms of the good RFPs for new megawatts for offshore wind. We're at about 2,000. We awarded about 804. New York is at 9,000. Massachusetts is double us. I believe Rhode Island is double us. So, so we're going to have to really get this up and running and find out, how well it's working, and then move forward. And then I also think we're going to need to supplement nuclear at some point with some small modular reactors, perhaps. So that could be another conversation or another question. Thank you.
Representative Ferrara?
So I think the question was, how does Connecticut rank with other states? Was that the question? I think the senator laid it out pretty good in that he talked about New York having 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind, and Massachusetts probably 4,000 to 5,000. And right now we've got a procurement for 2,000 megawatts, of which we've already procured about 800 or so. So that's where we stand. But I will say that it's an emerging industry. There's a lot of potential for growth in this industry. We have They called the transatlantic winds that we're going to be stealing and using in deep water as the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind. And I think that going forward, offshore wind, deep offshore wind offers a lot of potential for jobs and generation, and an increase to this as we further develop the New London pier and New London environment, as well as the Bridgeport situation. When this first came out, I inquired as to whether or not New Haven would be able to enter into the market, but because of the shallowness of the harbor and the port, it's not as competitive as Bridgeport and London. So with those two potential sites going forward, I think we have an opportunity to further improve the amount of generation of wind energy. But I'm not sure that we're really in competition with the other states. I mean, New York has some very prime real estate and opportunities in which wind energy can be generated, and cooperation between states can send energy can be procured from New York to the Connecticut market. So I think we have to look at all the options available to us and help this new emerging industry come to fruition and provide the opportunities for Connecticut workers.
Thank you. And Senator Cohen?
Thanks, Ashley. And this is another one that's really out of my wheelhouse, but I think we've heard from some of the experts here, but I would just say that I continue to praise and the efforts and procurement of the wind energy in the state. And, of course, always think that we could be doing more and should be doing more, but I really think we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Next question, are there management or handling concerns in terms of PFAS content of composted and anaerobically digested organic solids? So I'll let Senator Cohen start this one out, since this is definitely environment.
Yeah, and it's also public health, believe it or not. So, I think that this is something that we should look at, right? I don't know the answer to that question. I certainly think as you have more compostable materials in packaging, some of them still contain PFAS. PFAS continues, the poly or perfluoroalkyl substances continue to be an issue in terms of, everything you can think of really at this point, and we really need to get a handle on it. I think you'll be hearing both out of the Environment Committee, which is primarily focused on PFAS related to firefighting foam, and out of the Public Health Committee, they'll be focused on the drinking water component and the packaging component. But it's a really good question, because how does all of this impact the gas that we're producing and the emissions that inevitably come with a bioplant or composting piles as we develop some static composts in various towns throughout the state. So it's definitely something that we need to take a look at, and unfortunately not something we know a heck of a lot about at this point.
Great, thank you. And for everybody, regardless of your committee, do you think there's going to be more omnibus bills, larger aircraft carrier bills this session, or do you think there are going to be a lot of smaller individual bills? So I'll let Representative Ferraro start this one out.
Um, that's a good question, in that it's going to depend on the committee, actually. I know for sure that Department of Transportation will do an omnibus bill. I'm sure that Finance and Appropriations will do similar. My feeling is on many of the committees, like Energy and Technology and the smaller committees that are more focused, I think there will be more of an emphasis on individual smaller bills and less on omnibus and on those committees. But again, I think it depends on the committee and depends on the unfinished business from last session, which, as you know, caught us all off guard with COVID and really many committees had a lot of projects in the hopper and never saw the light of day. And I guess it's going to depend on how eminent those projects are and how much the committees under this current environment are going to want to get accomplished. So my feeling is less omnibus, more pointed, smaller bills, but I'm not an expert and I don't know how all the other committees are going to act.
Senator Fermika?
Thanks, Ash. I mentioned at the outset the uncertainty of the process. Excuse me. And I think that's going to drive the scenario here. Sorry, I got something in my throat. As we begin to get more used to these type of Zoom committee meetings, which is what we're going to see going through March, it may be easier for some committees, depending on the size. Energy, for example, has 2025, and Finance has 49, right? So everybody's gonna have to develop their own process, and it may be easier for some committees to take a public information session or public hearing on a number of individual bills and then pass them out one at a time, as it may be easier to manage. Other committees might find it easier to lump a number of bills that are like-minded together and try to pass them. So, I think it's a very difficult question to answer. I think it's going to probably be a lot of wait and see how we're doing. As the vaccine rolls out, I think there'll be less concern about gathering to vote in the chamber and in the House as we get into April and May, which is typically when most of those votes are happening. As you may all know, that the House has an opportunity to vote on their scoreboard from their individual offices, but the Senate does not. So that scoreboard in the Senate may probably be installed somewhere around March or April, and that may make it easier for us to vote on more bills from our office, or we may all be going in as the confidence is increased once the vaccine and perhaps hopefully this virus just dissipates. So tough question to answer, but I think it's going to be committee centric.
And Senator Cohen?
Sorry, I'm just pulling into the Capitol here, so checking in with the Capitol Police. But I would say it probably depends on the. Good morning. Thanks, you too. Sorry about that. I would think it probably depends on the committee, as Senator Fermika pointed out. And some bills are just more conducive to being grouped together than others as well. So, for example, on the Environment Committee, I think we may combine bills more than perhaps we have in the past. So you'll see some of that for sure out of our committee. But others may not have the ability to do that. So it'll just sort of be, I think it'll vary, as Senator Fermika pointed out.
Thank you. So we have another question, and it is Tweed Airport still considered viable? And we'll let Representative Ferraro start out with that one. And if we need some more clarification, Shelley, feel free to unmute and expand upon it.
Is it viable? Do you mean, is it operational? Because it
No,
is.
I know that. Yeah. No, I know it's quite operational, but I know that they're looking at expansions, et cetera, and it's so local and so downtown. I'm wondering if it's being considered at all in the transportation departments as being spoken of and going forward with their projects.
Okay. As far as I'm not on transportation and I don't know if those discussions are being had, but being that I live within 3 miles of New Haven Airport and have used New Haven Airport often and was actually there on that fateful day that the horrific airline crash took place. I could tell you that New Haven Airport doesn't have the capability for large jets to land there. And certainly any talk of expansion of that airport would have to come through the General Assembly, and I would be very welcome any conversations, and I would have some input in that. I know the residents of that area would not look forward to a great expansion of that airport. Many of them already complain about the noise and the low-flying jets and what have you. So I can't really offer any information with regards if it's being looked at currently, but it certainly would be a conversation that many people would want to have.
Yeah. I actually live right next to the airport, and I love it. And I've been on a couple of the conference calls with them, and I'm just looking, hopefully, for some positive discussions as to assistance to it or additions to it, et cetera. That's where I'm coming from on that. I love the airport. I'm right there. I'm a resident, and I was part of the noise abatement that they went through for that, just because of the noise issues. And it has addressed a lot of those issues. But I was just, again, looking forward and hoping to hear some positive comments on further usage, et cetera, for Tweed.
Great. Senator Cohen, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I mean, I can just say that I hope so too. I live, in the area, obviously represent towns that would tremendously benefit from the opportunity of expansion of Tweed. I think, as co-chair of the Bioscience Caucus as well, we're hearing over and over from this industry that, quite frankly, is exploding in Connecticut, that we absolutely need this expansion to create, sort of the next Cambridge, Massachusetts, when it comes to bio. And I think we have the opportunity to do that right here in Connecticut. I do think, we're moving forward. My good friend and colleague, Representative Sean Scanlon, as executive director now of Tweed, has been working very hard on that expansion is a viable option and that we can grow business and our economy here in the state as a result of that expansion. Unfortunately, I think we were getting some forward momentum there, and then we got hit with this global pandemic, and the airline industry has been hit tremendously hard as a result of the pandemic, and so we're going to have to plan that there's a delay as a result of that, as is the case with, a lot going on right now in the economy. But I'm a huge proponent of seeing its expansion.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Senator Fermika?
Just quickly to add to what both my colleagues have said, especially Senator Cohen, passenger travel is down 75%, and Bradley, and flights are down 50%. Local airports here are funded by what is known as the aviation fuel tax, which generated approximately $7 or $8 million a year to support regional airports. $1.5 million of that money went to Tweed, but with fuel taxes down by 75%, so.
Senator, you ended up on mute again.
Sorry, did I get muted there? Where did I end up?
Fuel tax down.
Taxes, were from the fuel aviation tax, $1.5 million of it went to Tweed, and that's, being significantly reduced, which is going to have an impact on their ability to have operations. So, we may have to relook at how airports function here in the state of Connecticut, and how they're funded. And I think to Senator Cohen's point that airport and air travel got hit very hard. We got to look at that first, and then to the questioner's comment regarding expansion, that's certainly a neighborhood conversation that needs to happen. But I think there could be some benefits to the state of Connecticut with an expansion there at Tweed. I will have to add, it's 9:56. We're going into session at 10 o'clock. And I still have to walk over there. So if I may thank everyone for the opportunity to have me on here today, and Ash for your great job as manager of this forum today, and to my great colleagues who I look forward to working with. Thank you. And again, keep an open level of conversation for all of you out there in the business community, because your input is going to be very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And again, that's perfect timing, because Senator Cohen, if you want to, in a minute or less, just last thoughts, floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ashley. I don't have too much to add. I just want to reiterate that I think it's really important for us as legislators to hear from all of you on a regular basis. These were all really great questions that prompted, me to be thinking deeper about some things, and we'll be going in and, wondering a little bit more PFAS when it comes to organics and what we're doing to incentivize, business startups in the eco field. So I think we need to be hearing from you on a regular basis. So I just would encourage you all to continue the conversation with us as we go through the session, and certainly as bill proposals do make their way through the process, to weigh in on those bill proposals as well. But just so grateful to be here this morning, and always, as I said at the beginning of this, I look forward to this summit every year, just to really gain some understanding and clarity around the issues that you think are most important.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here this morning, even though it's a session day and driving in. So Representative Ferraro, some closing thoughts, last comments.
Yes, I'd like to echo both senators in that I really appreciate having the opportunity to come in here today and not only listen to the fantastic questions that were posed. Some of them were pretty challenging for me, and were out of my wheelhouse, and they certainly stimulated a lot on my plate to think about. But really important to me also is, in addition to hearing what the folks online here are thinking about and are concerned about, getting the senator's perspective on these issues is very good for me, because it broadens my understanding, in that I rarely have an opportunity to speak with the senators, as you know, there's only 36 of them, and they have to cover all the same committees that 151 of us have to cover. And so they're very, very busy, and most of them have 5 and 6 committees where we only have 3. And so to have an opportunity to hear their opinions and hear the direction that they were moving in a lot of these issues is going to be very beneficial for me in bringing back some of this information to my House colleagues as well. So I'm very grateful that this format was provided, and look forward to working with you and the CBIA in the future going forward this session, and looking for guidance and issues that you can help us in. And so I thank everybody and appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. So that'll conclude our legislative portion, and we're going to shift over to our E2 committee subcommittee updates. So legislators, feel free to hop off or stay on. But again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. All right. So Marcy, if you could pull up the AIR subcommittee, that would be great.
Okay, hi, good morning, everybody. Steve and I have some updates on the air situation we have going on. As we start the year, we're kind of in the thick of annual reporting that's due. So for Title V emission statements, Deep just sent out a reminder to facilities about this year's reporting. A couple things to note on that. They're looking at what they're calling this critical procedural guidance that relates to particulate matter emission reporting. And what they're looking for is a breakdown of the condensable and filterable fractions of PM2.5 and PM10 emissions that are being reported. That this has been something that's, a feature of their annual reporting system that's been around for a while. But in the past, it hasn't been something that's been absolutely required all the time. A lot of times, the main requirement is to report the total emissions. And if there, to the extent there's information to report on the breakdown of condensable and filterable fractions of those, that was something that would go in there as well. But this year, it sounds like from this announcement that they sent out, it's going to be a explicit requirement of the report. So something to definitely look into and be aware of. Typically not a problem if you're just importing directly from AP42 emission factors. But there can be some conflicts where the total emissions are not matching up with the sum of the condensable and filterable fractions. Also, in cases where sources have certain stack test results that they're using to base their annual emissions on, those may not be segregated into condensable and filterable fractions. So there might need to be some additional estimates or additional work done to meet that requirement. Just a couple other things in that announcement too. The requirement to on the sources that have to be included with emission statements, that hasn't really changed. There's the same requirements as in the past, and there's also the in addition to things that either are permitted or are specifically called out in Title V permits, DEP is continuing to have this requirement to report emissions for sources or groups of sources that have an aggregate of more than a half ton per year of emissions of any pollutant. So that's been around for a few years, and that hasn't changed also. That's still in effect this year. And then just some other annual reporting reminders. Steve, do you want to jump in and go through that list?
Sure. Thank you, Dave. As you can see, it's an exhaustive list, and all the air people are very busy in the next month and a half, 2 months. And it's just a list of typical reports. There's a lot of reports that are specific for a source, such as NSR permits requirements, also NSPSs and NESHAPs each require, some of them require reporting during this period. One I did add in, so everybody might need a reminder for subpart DDDDD, the boiler NESHAP for major sources. A lot of people only have to do that once every 5 years. One important thing, the DEP is still requiring wet signatures, and I know that's problematic for a lot of the air people that are out there. I work in our facility, but there are a lot of people that work outside of the facility. They have to come in, they hope that their signatory is in, review the document, and then they have to bring it to their mailroom, or some people have their mailroom closed. I've also found out recently that they do, on their website, they do request that reports be sent electronically because the DEP isn't working in the office. So they want to get a hold of the reports that they need to do any work with. And that's sent to the DEP CACU at ct.gov. And I just found out with my last quarterly submittal that's due at the end of this month that if you have any test-related data, such as a RATA, that has to be sent to the DEP.SEM website, email address. But if you have audits, such as your opacity audits and your, God, I can't remember the name of the other one, but those have to be sent to DEP QA/QC reports.ct.gov. And besides that, that's pretty much just a listing of all the reports that are due. Dave, if you wanted to do the GPLPE replacement regulations.
So just a quick reminder on those. So now that the GPLPE has expired, I think we talked about this at the end of last year, but the annual reports that are due March 1st for sources that were covered under the GPLPE, even though that's expired, the annual report for your final year of coverage under that is due by March 1st. Anyone that is now operating under the new regulatory program, there is no specific reporting that's due this year for that, but starting next year, there will be annual reporting in accordance with the new regulatory program. And then also, just as a reminder, there's the sections 33A and 33B have a 45-day monthly record keeping requirement so that first period has just passed. So just make sure that that records are being kept and folks are staying on top of that, because that is a new requirement for at least for many sources that are going to be under that program. And then Steve, I don't know if you want to touch on the inspection stuff.
Yeah, Dave actually made this slide, and he did a very good summary of what a virtual inspection will be like. And my virtual inspection, Title V major source inspection, is just concluding, and it pretty much went the way that Dave described. And I know what they're having troubles with is they all went out to facilities to do their physical inspection, or most of them were done virtually online. And they then, after doing that phase, they're then writing up their reports. And it's a difficult thing to do, to go out and see many facilities and then remember which facility was what. So we're finding that they're coming back with multiple phone calls, multiple meetings, trying to square away the reports. I actually got to view my draft report to make comments on it. And it's gone fairly smooth for what you'd expect. And one thing that's key I know for any defense industry and probably for other people that have secure data that they don't want to be seen, the virtual calls are not recorded. They also have been instructed not to do screenshots. And it's been a pretty lengthy process. Usually this is over by now, but they're continuing on, and they're just about complete. And as Dave said, a big thing is for us major sources, we no longer have to do PIQs. The smaller sources will still have to do PIQs, and it is important that we still maintain an inventory of all of our small and insignificant sources that don't appear on our Title V permit. And the next topic, right now it looks like the only active air proposed regulation change is the incinerator permitting rule. And that is slowly creeping along, but it's moving. And it's now scheduled to be submitted to the LLRC meeting that's scheduled for 1/26 this month. And the decision will be due February 4th. Any questions? I think that's it for me. Dave, do you have anything more?
Nope.
I had
Thank
a
you.
question. Can you
Okay.
hear me, Steve?
Yes.
Yep.
And under your reporting update, who did you say is still requiring wet signatures?
The Air Bureau is still requiring wet signatures. And
What?
that means that I have, on any report that I submit to the DEP, and since they, as a Title V facility, they also have delegation for NESHAPs and NSPSs. So all my documents, I've been going to my signatory, meeting with him physically, and having him sign the document, and then I bring it back and I mail it in. I think they're giving us a little bit of a reprieve because typically, as opposed to EPA looks at a postmark as the time that it had been accepted. For DEP, it's when they actually get it in their hands and they stamp it. So I think we're getting a little bit of a break on that, but they're still requiring wet signatures.
So can you give me an example of a report that you have to send in with a wet signature that does not get sent to one of those DEP email addresses?
Oh, no. Okay, good example. I just recently handed in my Cogen quarterly report, and I had my signatory sign that. I've put it in the mail. I also sent a copy to the EPA. And since I have a CGA audit, opacity audit, and a linearity audit, I also have to mail it to the three emails. And if it doesn't have test data or audit data in it, you only have to send it to the CACU email address.
Okay, I send in quarterly reports regularly. I have not sent in a wet signature since they went to those email addresses. I don't remember seeing anything that said that. They're not getting their mail, so I'm not sure why they would want both. But
I don't understand that either, and I've heard complaints from other air people because my first quarterly statement I did not send in because my understanding was they didn't want wet signatures. So I've held mine on. I've kept a copy or the original here for any inspection or when I'm asked about it. But we've had people send emails to the DEP and they've replied, and I've seen these replies, and they said they want a report with wet signature sent in.
yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to continue to not do that because that's ridiculous, and I'll wait to hear them tell me that directly. That just doesn't make any sense right now. So thanks, though.
Yeah,
Thanks for the update.
Yeah.
And Jason, at the beginning of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, and I was going to say, I don't blame you for that attitude, and especially when the last time we had an E2 meeting, I believe DEP, Betsy Winfield, had said that they don't require wet signatures.
Yeah, and
Exactly,
also,
my understanding.
at the beginning of the pandemic too. I think it was I want to say it was Keith Hill. So I mean, they said specifically that it would be acceptable to, and it might have only in their mind been a temporary thing, but they did say specifically, you can submit a scanned, a scanned signature, a scanned copy of a signature to the email, and that would be sufficient for, things like quarterly reports or routine things. And, that was back in March. So, I would say, yeah, I think it's, unfortunately, it sounds like some folks are being told otherwise, but I think,
All right, folks, we're
And
gonna have to
and I,
move this along. We have 3 other committees to go, and we're supposed to be done by 10:30. So,
All right,
one
so
last quick
let's go
thing.
for
I
the
do
energy.
believe that they allow you an attachment with the emission statement through Emit. They'll allow you to do a electronic signature that way.
All right, well,
Sorry,
let's move
thank you.
over to the Energy Committee so they can give their update.
I'm nowhere near as interesting as the wet signature versus dry signature debate. So I'll keep it brief, Chuck, so that we can get back on schedule. The 2 things I wanted to report out on is, one, I'm only doing this because Debbie asked me to, but on December 21st, EPA hid the fact that we do indeed have a new general permit for construction activities. If you went onto the website for the general permit until about 3 days ago, it would look like we didn't have a permit. But if you scroll all the way down, you'll see that yes, indeed, we did. The letter went out on December 21st, and it was effective as of December 31st. So the good news is that we now have a new general permit. There are only a few changes if you are not a solar generating facility. If you are a solar generating facility, the infamous Appendix I that we've been talking about for a year and a half is now actually codified within the general permit. So that's the good news. DEEP received 204 comments, most of which they either addressed if it was small picayune things, or they chose to say, we disagree and here's why. But all of the hearing requests were dropped, and so DEEP was able to just push through the permit. The interesting thing is DEEP has told the solar industry that it wants to amend the general permit again already, and there are discussions that have just started about what that amendment is going to look like. There are a lot of folks who have said, look, we just changed the permit over. Why don't you wait and see what that does? And if we have adverse impacts, then we could talk about amending the general permit. But Ozzy and his team seem pretty adamant that they want to increase and enhance wetland buffers in particular, that are impacted by solar development. Which segues in neatly with one of the 6 overarching goals that DEEP just stated in its 2020 integrated resource plan. So on December 16th, just in time for Christmas, light reading for the holidays, DEEP issued its integrated resource plan. The draft of the IRP is designed to let everybody know what DEEP is thinking about and where DEEP thinks this ought to be headed. There's 6 primary focuses of the draft IRP. They include decarbonizing the entire electricity sector. We've talked about Connecticut wants to get to 0 carbon in the electricity generation sector by 2040. The draft IRP looks at various and sundry pathways to get there, and actually advocates for having the legislature codify that, because right now it's Lamont's Executive Order number 3, and so the draft IRP also asks that the legislature codify that 100% goal in this legislative session. So I'm sure that we'll be seeing laws on that. What I think are the 2 most controversial aspects of the IRP is the IRP wants to take a look at what they call securing the benefits of competition and minimizing ratepayer risk. What this really is looking at is it's a combination of whether or not in the late 90s we should have deregulated in the first place. Whether or not we should have done that, I couldn't tell you. But what I can tell you is it's going to be very, very difficult to get that toothpaste back into the toothpaste tube. However, as we move to a renewable energy procurement situation, since so much of this is being procured through state procurements, maybe the state can re-regulate that way. I'm not sure, but it'll be fascinating to watch. The other aspects of it, oh, and they also want to take on ISO New England and see whether or not we really ought to be participating in the ISO New England wholesale market, which is another, I think, fascinating idea in theory, but I have no idea how it would work in practicality. The other things are more minor. They want to ensure that rooftop solar and other energy efficiency programs and other renewable energy programs are being undertaken in economically distressed communities and environmental justice communities, as well as in the more rural communities. They also want to upgrade transmission systems in order to better deal with the variable electricity generation sources such as wind and solar, and look to ways to reduce load and increase storage. And they do recognize that they have to balance the other public policy goals that they want to do, and that they also have to work with other states in order to pursue the wholesale market reform, because Connecticut has finally recognized that it can't go it alone with respect to ISO New England. And then the last thing that the IRP calls for is for enhanced permitting and siting of renewable resources. There's been a lot of talk in the paper. There was an article in this week's Hartford Business Journal about the Department of Agriculture getting more and more involved in the setting of renewables. And quite frankly, it is almost impossible right now to find a site in Connecticut that somebody won't object to for some reason. And so it's a great idea to streamline the permitting and to figure out how we're going to do that. But again, I don't see the department actually coming up with a workable system with all of the fiefdoms that they have. And with that, Chuck, I'll shut up and turn it over to you.
I'll turn it over to Mark and Harold.
Okay, given the time, I've got a bunch of stuff to cover. I know Mark's got a couple of things. I'm gonna touch base on the release-based remediation program. A quick update on the Wave 2 EUR regulation status and spill regs. Spend most of my time on the release-based remediation program status for all of you. The materials, the summary that's before you cover the latest developments. When I finish, I'm going to ask Rachel Rosen, who's on the working group, for some additional observations. I was going to ask others who I know are on the call and on the working group for theirs as well, but I think we are time constricted. It's my hope that we will do a program next month on the Transfer Act and the release-based remediation working group developments, so that we have more time to do it on a more concentrated basis. The first meeting of the full working group was held this past Tuesday. The working group is going to meet the second Tuesday of each month via Zoom. A list of all working group members is on the DEEP's release-based program webpage. And on Tuesday, they covered housekeeping matters, process issues, and some organizational matters as well. The working group formed 5 topical subcommittees. There's going to be more as the process unfolds, but the 5 topical subcommittees to address the following concepts are discovery of historical releases, reporting of newly discovered releases, characterization of discovered releases,
immediate removal actions, and tiering. The subcommittees will make recommendations to the full working group for their consideration. Deep sent out a blast email email yesterday seeking volunteers from the public for the subcommittees. Need to fill out a survey that goes back to Deep, and then they will form the additional members of the subcommittees. First meeting of the subcommittees take place over a couple of days at the end of January, the 27th and 28th. If any of you haven't seen the blast email, send me an email or reach out to Ashley or to Marcy, and we'll get you the solicitation from Deep. Briefly on the Wave 2 EURs and the regulation status. The proposed regulations, both sets, are back before reg review. If you recall, just before Thanksgiving, reg review rejected without prejudice the proposed regulations, sent them back to Deep. Deep, beginning of January, posted revised regulations, draft regulations. They are on the agenda for the reg review on January 26th with a decision due date by February 9th. And spill regs, I do have a little more information for you that's supplements what's in the task force summary. The latest from Lori Salaby at Deep is that the draft regulations have been developed and they are presently at OPM for their review. Deep expects to go to notice on the proposed spill regulations the second quarter of this year. And if you recall, in the summer, Deep held a stakeholder process on the spill regulation concepts, and they asked for public comments, and they promised to post those comments, summary of those comments on their spill reporting web page. Lori tells me now that they should be posted soon. So hopefully those will be posted before they go to notice, so that we all can see the comments. And I will ask Rachel if she has any comments or anything additional on the release-based, the working group meeting of Tuesday, and then turn it over to Mark for some comments.
Okay, thank you. I do have a few things. I'll be very quick because I work best under pressure. So there were 3 additional topical subcommittees that the DEP has lined up, but they aren't talking about yet. They want to bring those out later in the process. Those are modification of cleanup standards for lower risk tiers, risk-based closure, and then a combined one for verification and audits. So DEP already has those in mind. EPOC proposed some additional subcommittees that you guys might find interesting. One is uniformity and consistency. One of the biggest problems with writing new regulations is that they conflict with existing regulations and statutes. And so we think there needs to be a subcommittee that just focuses on making sure that all the parts fit together and we don't have more unintended consequences than we really want. There will always be problems. We want to try to minimize them. Another subcommittee that we recommended, and this didn't go over as well as the uniformity concept, was standards for remediation. We would like to bring the numeric standards into this century and have them updated so that the numbers that we're using to base risk-based closure and for determining what releases go into what tiers and what levels, that we're using more current toxicity data and more current risk data. So we're starting from something that makes sense. So those are 2 things that we proposed. And that was it. I'll be quick. In a nutshell. Harold?
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me? Sorry about that. Mark, do you have
Yeah,
Anything to add from your side of the house?
sure. Real quick. Senator Cohen and Norm Needleman referred to some of the pending action on proposals to amend the statutes and regulations for waste and also waste to energy. So one of the proposals that was introduced recently was related to reclassifying the renewable energy credits from class 2 to class 1. Senator Cohen talked extensively about composting, anaerobic digestion, and what she referred to as the CCSMM, which has been led by Commissioner Dykes, along with 2 municipal officials. A lot of effort went into that. Their final report was not out as of yesterday, but it's quite a grab bag of ideas and proposals, and there's no money to fund any of it. So I'm not really sure where that's going. On the handout, I put a link to the DEP portal if anyone is interested. One thing to watch out for is the possibility of a new fee or tax on garbage, which if your company is generating a large amount of waste, you will definitely see an impact if that is implemented. And in any event, if Mira closes, the tipping fees and costs for waste and recycling are going to go up anyway. Information about the recycling and the Basel Convention, international agreements among nations possibly will impact the viability of plastics recycling and also costs. And then a big unknown is whether the new administration and EPA and other actions by the federal government will influence the landscape for waste management, because things have been pretty stagnant in the past 4 years, and that may change over the next few months. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Mark. Chuck, back to you.
And over to Debbie and Wojtek.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of updates and reminders. So first up is the MIU-SIU registration submittal extension. So this came out late in December. The DEEP, I'll say, has came to their senses, and we have an additional 90 days to submit these registration packages. So April 29th is the new deadline. They cited some COVID excuses, and then sampling might not be able to be done, and basically that us consultants are overwhelmed. So, thankfully, we have 3 more months to complete this. I urge you, if you have not already collected your samples, put together a sampling plan and get those samples collected. Also, the water diversion annual reporting is due at the end of the month. So if you have a consumptive diversion permit, you can go to the DEEP's website and just type in search for water diversion reporting. There's a Excel spreadsheet that you can download. And they want you to submit it electronically if possible. So I don't think a wet signature is required there. Also, just wanted to point out that I've heard from other clients that wastewater and stormwater are conducting virtual inspections, seem to be going pretty well. And so that crosses off their box. Also, just want to thank Lee for an update on the construction stormwater. We'll continue to watch. This year, the industrial stormwater general permit is set to expire. Ozzy is still maintaining that that will be issued I guess this summer, but he also indicated earlier that they're not going to move on to the industrial stormwater general permit until the construction has been finalized. So it sounds like there's another amendment coming there, so we'll be tracking that closely. And I'll turn it over to Wojtek.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us. I just have a quick update regarding PFAS and more along the lines of the AFFF foam containing wastewaters. So there's a lot of literature out there being generated, on the topic of PFAS, as we know. But we all do realize that we look to EPA for some leadership and guidance on somewhat of a common denominator type approach to dealing with PFAS, and seemingly EPA realizes that too. So every once in a while, they will issue a document for everyone to see, and they did that on December 18th by issuing an interim guidance on destruction and disposal of PFAS. And the key takeaway point is that they're suggesting to store this material for next 2 to 5 years in hopes that other options will emerge by then. And that is if immediate destruction or disposal is not imperative. And other than that, there's other 5 disposal options mentioned, one of them being permitted deep well injection, Class 1 deep well injection, and followed by various landfill disposal, but also incineration and other thermal treatments. So if you haven't already seen it, I believe the public comment period on the document is until February 22nd of this year. Thank you.
Okay, then I think that wraps it up. I thank you guys for putting together these presentations. I note that the water presentation in particular has a lot of information on it for people to look at. It goes on for 15 pages, so make sure you copy these and keep them close. Our next 2 meetings are February 19th and March 19th, right, Marcy?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll see you all then, unless anybody else has anything pressing before we all get off. We're going to adjourn the meeting. Ashley, thank you for moderating the legislative session. And welcome to your, I guess, your first real
debut.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Happy Friday. Have a good one.